Hi, wonderful bio nerds, and welcome to our video on protein synthesis overview. I found it was pretty important for me to do a video on the overview of protein synthesis. It would be super easy for me to just skip this whole thing and jump right in and get into the nitty-gritty of this rather complex process. However, I want to use this as kind of like our beacon of application. This whole complex process is very, very, very important. And it's important to understand why it's important. How many times can I say important, right? So with this video, I'm going to take you on a 3-part adventure to self-discovery. And that adventure includes a little bit of backtracking. So we're going to look deep into the past. We're going to visit a Lego factory, which is random, but you'll see it's got a point. And then we're going to look at a very, very simplified overview of the cellular process of protein synthesis. But once again, this video is designed to make sure that you understand the big picture so that when we get into the nitty-gritty, it doesn't all get lost and you're thinking, why do I have to learn this? Because this is a very important and very applicable process. So without further ado, let's jump in. Now this is a picture of, this is a famous National Geographic picture, and it was titled, this first picture right here was titled The Afghan Girl, and it was taken, I believe, about 20 years ago. And the photographer was visiting this Afghan refugee camp in Pakistan, and he was photographing people to try to figure out the refugee story. And he photographed this girl and he took it home, and he was totally mesmerized by her eyes. And she was actually on the cover of the magazine, I think in the 80s. And the crazy thing is he never knew her name. So National Geographic sponsored this photographer to go back to Afghanistan or Pakistan, wherever, to find her and find out her life story. And he did. He found her. This is 17 years after this picture's been taken. This woman is about in her 30s. Actually, she didn't know how old she was because there wasn't any record of it. But the thing that made him certain that it was her eyes. You can see that she has these striking, almost penetrating eyes, right? They've got a mixture of colors. There's green and blue and yellow, and it's unmistakably her because of her eyes. And her eyes are what we would call a phenotype. Now, a phenotype is just what you physically look like. So she has, gosh, I can't even explain the color of her eyes, hazel-ish. I have blue eyes. My husband has brown eyes. That would be a phenotype, something that you physically show. So what color is your hair? Some people have a hair phenotype of blue hair. Some people have a hair phenotype of no hair whatsoever. So once again, a phenotype is what we physically look like, and it's also what can be altered, right? So if I don't want to have brown hair, I can make my brown hair blonde. So anything that is what we look like. It's what we see in each other. So phenotype is, we're going to look just at eyes here. And our eye color is determined by a protein called melanin. And eye color is actually determined by 8 different genes that code for different proteins. But we're going to simplify it, and we're just going to say melanin is the protein, and it is the main protein involved in our eye color. So our eye color is determined by the presence or absence or type of melanin that is produced by the cells in our irises. Now that melanin, since it's a protein, its shape is determined by the order of amino acids. The order of amino acids is determined by a specific codon found on RNA. And the arrangement of RNA nucleotides is determined by the arrangement of DNA nucleotides found in the nucleus of each and every one of our cells. So when we say what we look like as a result of our DNA, we really do mean it. And in biology, this is actually called the central dogma of biology. It's when we go from gene to protein. And then proteins are determining what we look like and also how our body works. So let's dive in. Let's start. We've looked at phenotype, eye color. Let's look at the protein. Now, we're focusing just on eyes, right? One little phenotype. Now, the protein involved is melanin. And what's interesting is within these are melanocytes, these are just cells, fancy word for iris cells that contain melanin. So these are melanin containing cells found in your iris, and they have these little packets called melanosomes, and those melanosomes contain melanin. There's two main types of melanin. One of them is like a blackish brown melanin, and the other one's like a reddish brown melanin. And the amount and percentage of each type of melanin gives you your eye color. Now, those of us that have blue eyes, like me, I have blue eyes, we actually don't really have that much melanin at all. And our melanosomes are pretty empty. They're lacking this protein. So our blue eye color, we don't really have this melanin protein. So what happens is when light goes into our eyes, it actually penetrates deeper. And that blue color you see is the reflection of light off of other proteins found deeper within our irises. Kind of like how the ocean is blue, because a bunch of wavelengths of light go into it, and the only wavelength that's reflected back is blue. So that's why the ocean's blue. So those of us that have hazel to brown eyes, we have higher concentrations of melanin. And so this is able to actually absorb the light before it penetrates the eye. And then we have a darker eye color because we have more melanin. So the amount and type of melanin you have is all determined by what is produced in these melanocytes within the iris. Now, we talked about melanin being a protein. That was a quick lesson on eye color. But let's go back and talk about melanin being a protein. Now, we know proteins have this super crazy shape. They look like they could be on top of a birthday present. But they're made of all these little spirals and kinky things and make up this special shape. And this shape is actually what determines its function. And if a little thing goes wrong with this shape, this protein becomes dysfunctional and cannot work. So it's really important that everything is coded correctly so that we can make sure the shape is what it needs to be. Now, what do we mean by coded correctly? Well, we're going to go backwards and forward on this. So if this is this should be review, by the way, you should know this. If this was our quaternary structure, this was our melanin right here. This is our final product. Well, if we go back to the beginning, we know that the monomer of a protein is an amino acid. We have about 20 amino acids. I'm just going to say AA for amino acids. And they are, in a protein, it starts with a specific arrangement of these 20 different amino acids. It could be using a ton of the same amino acid. It could be using only 3 different types of amino acids. It could be using all 20. However, they are all arranged in a special sequence, just like the alphabet, specially arranged as words so that we can understand them. So remember the bond that connects it, pop quiz. What is this bond called? It's called a peptide bond. And this chain, this primary structure chain, is often called a polypeptide chain. Peptide chain. Now these amino acids all have their unique chemical structure, and when they are aligned together and bonded together, there's all these extra interferences or interactions that happen. So if this was one amino acid, we look at it here, there's all these interactions between the amino acids that cause the polypeptide chain to kind of fold up. And depending on the amino acids, it can create a beta-pleated sheet or it can create an alpha helix. And all of these foldings and bondings all fold up on each other to form a tertiary structure, which then combines with other tertiary structures to make our quaternary structure melanin. But the point of this slide was to know that melanin, its shape, is totally dependent on the order of amino acids within this polypeptide chain. Now that we've talked about amino acids, where do amino acids come from? Well, this is a amino acid decoder wheel. You're going to become really familiar with this as we practice with it, but we're looking at this and we see a G, an A, a C, and a U. Now these are all the nucleotides or the nitrogenous bases found in RNA. Remember, RNA does not have a T. Instead of a T, it's got a U, so A always pairs with U instead of T. So RNA has these three-letter words called codons, and those three-letter words code for an amino acid. So if I gave you the code CCC, you would go, okay, C, C, C. We are talking about the amino acid proline. So where does that RNA, where do these three-letter words come from? Where do they code for in RNA? Well, they come from your DNA in your nucleus. And that is the whole process. We start with code in our DNA. It's made into RNA code that codes for a protein, or sorry, that codes for an amino acid, which makes a protein, which does some sort of function in your body. There we go. Now we are going to visit the Lego factory. This is a story, and it's an analogy story. So just sit back, relax. I'm sure you'll remember the story after you've heard it. So here is a Lego factory. It's this big factory-looking building, and I'm not sure where it's located, but I'm sure it's top secret. It's got like a moat with dragons and crocodiles in it so that you can't ever go there. So here's our Lego factory. And the Lego factory is responsible for building all the things that we need in our daily life. So in this case, kitchen counter. Notice the cookie jar in the back. Kind of want one of those. Lego factory also makes our really awesome personal electronic devices such as our computers. Our cameras, calculators made at the Lego factory, even donuts made at the Lego factory. So the Lego factory is responsible for all of our daily things. The Death Star, I don't know if you know that, but it was made at the Lego factory. The Beatles, Lego factory. All the cities and streets and street signs and trees and everything, all made at the Lego factory. So the Lego factory is very, very, very important. Here's our Lego factory CEO, Mr. Lego, and this is him just encouraging the awesome workers of the Lego factory to do a great job that day because their job is very important. And the CEO hangs out in this office up here, and this office has this amazing view of the whole factory, so he can kind of look out and make sure that everything's okay. And the office is super posh. It's got this nice desk, nice sitting area, lounging, great view. But the most important thing about this office is that in this drawer right here, oops, where's my color? There we go. In this drawer right here contains the blueprints for all of the different Legos produced at the Lego factory. Now this isn't the blueprints for all of the items produced. It's the blueprints for all of the little Legos and how they are arranged. Now there happen to be 20 different types of Legos that are used to make all the things that we need in our lives, like our calculators and the Beatles and the Death Star. So those blueprints give the instructions to, one, not only make these Legos, but two, tell how they should be arranged to make the item that we need. Here's the deal though. The Lego factory workers are a little whack. They're a little deranged and they cannot be trusted. They do their job well, however, that's pretty much the only thing that they do well. So what needs to happen is that there's a special Lego factory worker in charge that goes into the office and makes a photocopy of those blueprints. So the blueprints always stay in that top drawer, except for when they're being copied, of course, but they never ever leave the office. And what leaves the office is the photocopy of the blueprints of those 20 different Legos. And those blueprints, if something happens to them, no big deal, because we have the originals that we can always make copies of back in the office. So the Lego factory workers use these blueprints to make all of the things that are needed to be made at the Lego factory. Our elevators, our car tires, our iPods, everything made at the Lego factory. Now sometimes those blueprints can be copied incorrectly. Maybe something's cut off, maybe the copy machine put a big line through it. So sometimes we get Legos that are made improperly and they can't fit with other Legos. They are deformed, basically, because the instructions to make them was off, so the Lego factory worker made the wrong type of Lego. However, sometimes these instructions can lead to really awesome mutations, hint hint is what we would call these, really awesome mutations, but most of the time it just kind of messes up the Lego blocks so that they can't be used. So this was supposed to be the skyscraper production unit, but they photocopied their blueprints wrong, and so the skyscrapers ended up looking like this, all weird right here. And this was supposed to be Justin Bieber, but they kind of messed him up a bit as well. So as you can see, the Lego factory is a pretty important place. I think you'll be able to draw some parallels between our story of protein synthesis and the Lego factory as well. So that leads us to our very, very rough overview of protein synthesis. Now, within the DNA, or within the cell has a nucleus, and within the nucleus is our DNA. And we know if we unraveled that DNA, we would have 6 feet of it. So here's our pretty little DNA right here. And what happens to our DNA is it always stays in the nucleus. It never leaves, because if it leaves, it has a potential to get damaged, and we cannot have that happen because this is our original copy. But what does happen is during the transcription process of protein synthesis, we make what's called a single-strand copy of DNA called messenger RNA. Or I'm going to cross that out, messenger RNA, or mRNA. Now this mRNA is allowed to leave the nucleus, and where it goes is this thing called rRNA. Now we're outside of the nucleus and we're in the cytoplasm of the cell. So the mRNA then goes to this, let me get a different color, goes to the rRNA, oops, I missed my A on there, which stands for ribosomal RNA, which basically is a ribosome. And the ribosome is kind of like the factory worker, where it reads this code and it takes tRNA, which is called transfer RNA. Transfer RNA holds a amino acid, a specific amino acid attached to it, and also has code, a 3-letter codon that matches a 3-letter codon on mRNA. So tRNA matches up with the 3-letter codon on mRNA, and with that we get a specific amino acid that corresponded to an mRNA codon, which corresponded to code within our DNA. And that happens over and over and over again until we get this long chain of amino acids coming out of the rRNA. This is our polypeptide chain. And that is, in a nutshell, protein synthesis. However, we are going to go much deeper in our next video, and we're mainly going to be looking at this section right here. This is called transcription. And this process right here that happens in the cytoplasm involving The mRNA, tRNA, and rRNA is called translation. So, in review, we found out that genotype causes phenotype through the central dogma of biology, where we start with DNA. DNA is code for proteins, and proteins are what make you, you. We also learned that proteins are created by a process that utilizes code in our DNA to assemble primary structures of proteins. So that code in our DNA is what determines the specific order of amino acids within our proteins, right? Or polypeptide chains. So if our DNA is incorrect, however, our protein will be misshapen and it will not be able to function. So it's really important that this process works properly, or else we would be a bunch of mutants running around trying to run the world. Be awful. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed your journey through self-discovery, and I look forward to talking about this more with you. Take care.